You may think that everyone has figured this out and that they all know where we're going and that you're totally behind and you're just lost. Guess what? You're not. Many of us, even those of us who live it every day, I'll be honest, if you ask me what AI is going to be like in 5 years, I'll be like, I would love to know in 2.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that it's out of control. It's just with all of the advancements and seeing all of the wars, like I just heard Apple's now creating their own version, and throwing it out. Every day the landscape changes. That doesn't mean that your reasons for using it though change. It just means how we do that. So it's important to have that thought process first.
In a world of AI and Chat GPT, no, I'm just kidding. Ain't no one got time for that. I brought in experts to help me navigate what in the world artificial intelligence means today. Are we from Skynet and Terminator level? Where are we at in this world and what does it make sense? So I brought really qualified experts with years of experience to actually make sense of it. Not someone who wrote their script on ChatGPT yesterday, who have been in the game before ChatGPT even existed as an afterthought. So Scott and Susan, if you'd be more willing to introduce yourself, and we'd love to just dive into a conversation.
Sure, absolutely. So I am Susan Westwater, and this is Scott Westwater. And yes, we are a relation. We are a married couple, but we are the co-founders of Pragmatic Digital. But we're also co-authors of one book that's out right now called Voice Strategy, and one that will be coming out soon called Voice Marketing, Harnessing Conversational AI to Engage Your Consumers. And so we've been in the conversational AI voice space since 2017. And prior to that, I come from a user experience digital strategy perspective, being on corporate side as well as on the big advertising, tier 1 advertising agency side.
And I'm Scott. My background is on the design side and also user experience. So a lot of what I bring to the table is digital strategy, identifying the right opportunities, also doing a lot of research. So either stakeholder research internally to understand what the organization's objectives are, or interviewing the audience, try to figure out where voice and this conversational AI thing could actually help them get their tasks done quicker, make purchases faster, whatever their goals are, trying to actually uncover those so we can marry it up with what the business is trying to achieve to actually create something that moves the needle.
Yeah, and we've been doing this, like we saw this with the web, we saw this with mobile, we saw this with social. And so this is when we saw what started coming forth with voice and voice control and those types of things, it was one of those moments of, we're not going to sit on the sidelines and let someone else become the experts this time. We're going to dive right in because we've navigated these waters of everything from how do you sell in a website when someone tells you is the internet a fad?
Right.
Yes, I've actually had to do that presentation. How do you navigate and how do we take these really exciting, amazing things that are right now peak hype cycle and actually turn them into useful, usable things that actually make for better experiences and aren't just a thing that's going to be really fancy and really cool to get PR, but doesn't actually move a needle.
Well said. I just snaps for days. When you think about AI, what is your initial first emotion that you hear it in common practice now?
It depends on who's saying it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
Ooh, fair.
Because sometimes, I'm not going to lie, my eyes roll. The whole, here's a way to super prompt and prompt engineer your way to 10x your revenue. That's sure, it can be done. And I'm not going to knock that there are ways that we use these tools. The reality of it is, and I get super excited though, when I start to hear someone say though, I was messing around with Chat GPT. Can you tell me more about how this can work? That's when I get excited. I get excited because, and I even have said this when I've been presenting this year, is November 2022 was a love-hate day for me. When Chat GPT came out, it was like, oh my gosh, how much bad content could go into the world? Because there already is some sucky content. And being a content person, that's kind of like where my heart goes. But at the same time, we started having really good conversations again. Instead of it just being, I just don't want to be tied to the little box on a desk. It was, wait, I can think of what it means to have an actual conversation with a brand. How do I harness this so that I'm actually having a real conversation with someone as opposed to the, here's what I want to foist upon you, dear user, so that I can make sure my agenda is held. And so that's a really exciting thing. So it makes me very excited. AI, I think, is fun just because there have been flavors of it around for quite some time. So it's always fun to see it come back up again, like, no, this is the new AI. It's got a mustache on now, or something like that. Because we knew about programmatic. We knew about decision making, predictive modeling, all that good stuff. I mean, my favorite gentle reminder is if you have ever used spell check or Grammarly, you've been using AI. Mm-hmm. It's just this. So it's exciting. I love like how many facets it is. So for me, it's a big, exciting jam for me. I mean, Scott, I think you feel the same way, but
yeah, I mean, I like she said, like Chat GPT was a blessing and a curse. So the blessing is there's a lot more awareness of AI and what conversational AI is. And so that's good. It's actually done more for us than we could ever have done for ourselves from a marketing and just an awareness standpoint. I think the big challenge right now is there is a lot of that hype, and there are a lot of people that are promising the sun, moon, and stars. And I've even heard people say, oh, you don't need to worry about strategy. You don't need to worry about your content. Just type right into Chat GPT or another large language model, and it'll do it all for you. Which, as someone who had worked in pharma and other highly regulated industries, it just makes me like super twitchy because there's no legal team that's going to say, oh yeah, that's fine. Just let the AI say whatever it's going to say. Like in those worlds, it has to be very controlled. You need to make sure that it's exactly the language that would be used. Yes, there are a lot of things you can do with it, but we want to make sure that we're taking a nuanced approach so we don't put the company at risk, so we don't open ourselves up to any sort of bad PR, bad publicity, or worse, a lawsuit. So trying to help people identify where AI in general fits. And then specifically when it comes to the voice thing, like here's a way you can chat enable your website or voice enable your website to make it easier for people to find the information. Or here's how you can do a messenger bot to address customer service. These are all things that you can do. It's just a matter of where are the big pain points for a business and where can we actually really make some inroads when it comes to engaging with our audiences.
I'm a business. I'm a marketer. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a creator. I'm XYZ. It's kind of like chai tea. Like it really means tea, but now we're emphasizing AI more. But to your point, if you ever use spell check, if you use Grammarly, if you use these other sub things that we don't even think about, there's some component of it. Oh, we've already been interactive. It's like I'm a big Marvel person, so Secret Invasion. They've already infiltrated way before anyone's on our radar. But now we're exploring, going from generative and predictive and other AI categories, different models, tying it to different applications and integrations. One, it's awesome. It gives me kind of .com days in a certain realm. But on the flip side, if people aren't educated, they're either going to run through a lot of money, time, and resources chasing something that won't produce general ROI for them, or they're going to miss out on the opportunities and struggle. So if a business is coming to you two, as great as you are, where do we start to guide them on this journey of utility with AI?
I mean, a lot of what we do is that upfront education. So it's here's what it is, here's how it can be used in your industry, here's from research that we've conducted what your audience wants to do with it. And it's really starting with almost like voice 101. And that's really where we were, say, 3-4 years ago. More recently, as we've talked to brands, they understand kind of the general, flavor of voice and conversational AI. They just don't know specifically how to apply it to their organization. So it's almost like we're at voice and conversation 201 or 301, where it's a little bit more advanced. But here's specifically for your organization, for instance, an entertainment brand, here's the types of things that AI can do, and recommendation engines and a bunch of other stuff like that to help people find the content they're looking for. So it's understanding what the business and audience challenges are, articulating those, and then figuring out, does voice or conversational AI make it better? If yes, please proceed. If no, if it makes it more difficult, don't do it. Like, we're big proponents of the technology, but if it makes it more difficult, it introduces friction into the experience, it's actually going to hurt your brand more. So a lot of what we do is identify, within your existing channels, where are those opportunities? Where is it going to fit fastest, give you the biggest bang for your buck? And then how can you start to expand out into other areas within your organization?
It's exciting. You want to jump right into the doer-itis, right? You want to do the things. You want to show the fancy demo that shows that with the, the mere command, it will launch a rocket ship. What we have to understand, though, is number one, does our audience even want to launch a rocket ship? Like that sometimes, like, wouldn't it be cool should not be where you start.
Right.
Blasphemy.
Yeah, I know. It should be more of understanding, what have you been solving before? What have you been solving well? How do we extrapolate that into a new way?
Yeah.
Treating it almost like a whole new channel is how I like to think of it. But it should, very similar to the whole comment of that shouldn't be twins, they should be cousins with the other content. If you build it in a silo full away, you're going to have to spend more time and money bringing it back over. Yeah. The other thing too is we look at what's a roadmap, because there are what are the wins we need to have today so that we can fight tomorrow. Because if you say it will take you 24 months to build this amazing assistant that will do the sun and the moon and the stars, you're going to throw a lot of money after something that might not be in market or by the time it happens. I'll be honest, writing our book, we have rewritten the first 2 chapters 4 times.
4 times, yeah.
4 times. And we only were writing that over an 18-month period. That's where it's important to also think about, where do we start, of what do we need to achieve to prove, and then go from there. And that's where we look at a model of starting from an idea of optimize the content you have. Make that voice friendly, make that conversational friendly. That doesn't mean putting question marks at the end of sentences. That's not a conversation. Putting question marks at the end of your H1s does not turn that into a conversation.
Right.
But the reality of it is taking that, looking at what you learned from that, from the experimentation of then going into the idea of creation. I'm going to create this thing that's dedicated. Then you go into full on integration of, I have this thing I've built that is integrated and all of my channels work together seamlessly. And that's an important way of looking at it. By the way, that was not done in a day. Even though I saw an amazing post the other day by Mike Caput from the Marketing AI Institute. And it was, you may think that everyone has figured this out and that they all know where we're going and that you're totally behind and you're just lost. Guess what? You're not. Many of us, even those of us who live it every day, I'll be honest, if you ask me what AI is going to be like in 5 years, I'll be like, I would love to know in 2.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that it's out of control. It's just with all of the advancements and seeing all of the wars, like I just heard Apple's now creating their own version, right. And throwing it out. Every day the landscape changes. That doesn't mean that your reasons for using it though change. It just means how we do that. So it's important to have that thought process first of what am I trying to solve first? That's where we start. Mm-hmm. And then we go to, does it make sense of this tech or that tech? There are times where I'd love to use voice more, but maybe it's sensitive information that no one wants to say out loud, or maybe it's things like that. So it's making sure that you've got those caveats thought through and having that sort. But we do very much intentionally think about, what does the business need to do? What does my user need? Because if you don't have both of those, you're not going to get that ROI story, but then you're also not going to get the good customer experience or the reason they even use it.
You already touched on a little bit of that history set. I'd love to dive in deeper on the intersection strategically when you combine voice and conversational AI, particularly. Like, where did that derive from that led to the book and everything?
We started, like Susan said, back in 2017. And at that point, we were really focused in on voice. Chatbots existed, but at that point, it was kind of, the hype cycle had already kind of booming. They were in their little trough of disillusionment. And then, the next one right after that was voice and Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant and Siri. And so we basically got in towards the tail end of the chatbot world, which it's really, this conversational AI thing is actually kind of an umbrella term where chatbots fit underneath it, voice assistants fit underneath it, your IVRs, your call center, the automated call center stuff, that all kind of fits underneath this idea of conversational. And really what it is using natural language or how we normally speak to interact with computers, and then actually having the computer understand and responding in some way. So the output could be voice, it could be text, it could be images, it could be video. But at the end of the day, it's really the computer understanding us for the first time. So we don't necessarily have to learn all the nuances and, you have to click this and, do this like twister thing on the keyboard to actually get the keyboard command right. It's literally just using your natural language. And if we as strategists and creators have done our jobs, the system should understand it, say, this is what they're trying to accomplish, and then actually give them the response that they're looking for.
The reason this even happened, we had the pleasure to connect, Susan and I, we both spoke at DigiMarCon Midwest in Chicago, Soldier Field, Chicago Bears. We're not even going to talk about that. We'll see what happens this year, but I digress. Yeah. And I remember trying to put all this together. They changed the times and tables like last minute, and we're thinking about the temperature in the room. What's the temperature check in the room involving AI and marketing? And at first, I had this deeper presentation I was going to, and I paused, and I was like, would this make sense to the average marketer who's probably their first conference back post-pandemic, possibly?
Yeah.
They're navigating all new technology, a whole new world. You got different budgets, you have different audiences, you have different metrics, and then here comes AI out of nowhere. Do I jump ship? Is this going to make or break me as a marketer, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a creator? What is going on? And I'm thinking, and I'm like, and I talked on the resurgency of how we're trying to change and digital marketing is changing. And I remember we connected because I was giving just overview stats of chatbots and AI and how that just passed the baton to your zone of genius and went to the room. And I was thinking, for those who don't know, I'm a big, not intentional, but acronym focused for neurodivergent learners, just for memory. And I had said, CUP, capacity, utility, and performance. Before you dive in deep into AI to its fullest capacity, go down that rabbit hole, like what is the capacity that you need it for? What are you struggling with?
Right.
What are the utilities that make sense? And how are we going to quantify performance? Because I love what you said, Scott, and I'll tie it to y'all in a second. I was thinking back to you said about a recipe in my mind. I think of AI right now as like really good seasoning. And the right amount is going to make a great flavor. It's going to be awesome. And sometimes you can put that flavor on multiple things. Then other times you put too much flavor, it just destroys the whole dish.
Yep.
Or you use the same flavoring on all of your dishes in the meal. Everything tastes bland. It doesn't taste original, doesn't taste fresh. And we have to know how much AI salt do we put in on our business.
Yeah.
So I love what you were carrying on about that recipe. Just stood out to me. But to the point, I want to really get to the point of one, our connection, two, the temperature check. And Susan and Scott, from your perspective, and obviously you went to other conferences after that one, what has been a temperature check of marketers and business owners looking at AI as you've been presenting and having conversations?
Well, we've seen some of the research that the Marketing AI Institute has done, and it was something like 15-ish, don't quote me on the number, but it was a low number of marketers said that they were comfortable and understood AI. The rest of the people, it was kind of varying scales, but I'm just getting my feet wet. I've heard of it, and I have no idea where to start. Really illuminating because it was the education part that is so critical right now. Like people are dying for education. Like, how can this apply to my CRM? How does this apply to personalization? Like, what can I do from a content generation standpoint? Like, there's all these questions. And I love the idea of AI salt, and I might actually steal that term because at the end of the day, it's a tool. It's just like any other tool or any other software that we have. And yes, it's incredibly powerful and it can do a lot of stuff, but you have to use the tool in the right way and be intentional with it. And I think that's the big missing piece of all this hype that we're hearing right now. Yes, you can use it to generate content, but is it good content? Will it resonate with your audience? Will it actually index on search and actually bring traffic to you? Like, there's a lot of like promise and do more. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. I've used it for creating personas and actually having it review content and actually saying, as this type of a marketer, will this resonate, and have it give me feedback based on that. Like, I've actually gone super deep into those types of things. So it's incredibly helpful, and it's really improved the amount of output that I can actually have. But it's also because I've been a practitioner for 20 plus years. I know what goes into the stuff. I'm just using it to help me shortcut certain things. Or if I need to do some quick down and dirty research, I can use that plus a lot of the research that I'll actually find, on third-party research websites or, in this industry report or whatever. But being able to pull it all together and actually compile it into one single place and then have it help me generate insights based on that. Where are people at? And I think the general vibe that we're getting is, I haven't even started with social. How could I jump into AI? We're hearing that more often than not. Or we just got our CRM thing figured out, or we just integrated a POS system. Like, this is just another thing that we have to add. So I think as AI ambassadors and also creators, we have to be cognizant of where our audiences are and all the stuff that they're dealing with, because it is such a small part of a larger world that they're dealing with on a day-to-day.
Yeah, and I think there's an intimidation factor. Yeah. I mean, I remember back in the day when it was marketing and then you put digital in front of it and people lost their dang minds. Like, I don't know how to do this. And it's like,
same thing.
Trust me, they're like, who we're talking to is the same people. It's just the pictures move this time.
Right.
Very, very, I mean, obviously we live in a very different world than the pictures do more than move now. But the reality of it is this making it approachable, because there is this understanding of like, I've had people come and go, I didn't want to ask this question because I didn't want to look stupid. So like after some of my talks, it'll be dead silent. I'll be like, oh, wow, that went over very poorly. Great. And I got to rework my whole presentation. And then as soon as I get off the stage, there's 15 people waiting to talk to me because they didn't want to look stupid in front of this group of people by asking a question, which, by the way, very rarely is stupid.
Right.
And that's the thing of it is, but there is that intimidation of, I feel like I should be looking savvy. I should know this. The reality is there's a lot of things too, because we've spent so much time in the, here's how it happens, that there are people like, I'm not a linguist. That's okay. You don't have to be. Like, I spend a lot of time also saying that's okay. You know your things. And that's where then you bring in folks like Scott and myself to say, hey, who I know the linguists, we know the developers, we know those folks.
Right.
They will bring that together to make that useful. The other side of it too, from the intimidation factor, is I saw what happened when Microsoft had a bot and it got reprogrammed into being a neo-Nazi activist. Oh my gosh, can that happen? Yes, it can. If you are completely irresponsible and go, I'm going to make an instant thing that I never look at ever again. Yes, it needs human intervention, but the risks can be mitigated, as opposed to even as Scott was talking about pharma. That doesn't mean that we don't talk to pharma clients. It just means these are the requirements we live within, and these are the ways that this is going to work out. I always like to think of them as fun little fences. The fences that keep me in the yard of where we're playing when we think about those requirements. So it's important to know those. I think the intimidation though is there is this, oh my gosh, I can't 1000% understand it. I should know every aspect of it. No, you don't have to. You should know what your business is about and some of the flavors, to keep going with our metaphor here. But you also don't be afraid to ask questions. And don't be afraid to think that you have to know every answer in the room, because just right now, I'm still working on projects of ways of using responsible AI, ways of putting that through and providing those checklists. So it's an exciting, amazing time to be a part of it, because you're basically defining things that may live for years and to come, or at least more than 20 minutes, depending on what happens to the landscape. But the reality is this is like an incredibly organic, creative time where solutions we can think in a sci-fi way. So it's kind of embracing that, as opposed to being intimidated by, oh, what are all the risks? How do I justify that? And it's also, you don't need $1 million.
Yeah. And I mean, there's things as simple as NVIDIA has a chipset where the AI will actually have your eyes looking at the camera, even if you're not. So like if you're trying to read off of a script, or like in this case, I got my screen underneath the camera, like it would actually just recreate my eyeballs and making it look like I was looking at the camera. That's super awesome. That's AI though. And so like those are the things that are just going to become so ubiquitous we don't even give it a second thought. There's, companies that are using AI for media optimization. So not only are they using it to predict how campaigns will perform and which creative will perform better, they're actually going through and using it to optimize after the fact and making recommendations and having, maybe 1,000 different flights for media when it comes to a creative campaign, because it can scale and it can actually try different things. So there's a lot of things that are quote unquote AI. And then when you talk about the conversational piece, I mean, there's a ton of applications there. So it's just identifying what the problems are and then having people like us around to help you say, okay, this is the technology you'd want to address it here. Here's how it might play here. Here's some other systems that's going to have to tie into over here. So let's think about this. And so we're that quarterback or that head chef that's kind of, composing and orchestrating the whole thing. That's kind of how we see our roles, is really helping businesses be successful, because we come from the marketing and also the technology side. We can speak to both. We can speak to the developers. We can speak to designers. We can speak to CMOs and really help everyone kind of speak a common language.
Common language. That's key. And I love the responsible AI. And I love that you position yourselves as AI ambassadors. And we're in an era of exploration.
Yeah.
And so we don't have everything figured out. And I premise people who would be listening or watching to consider, when you immediately lead with negativity or all the negative what ifs, that's a trigger response of fear, of change, of adaptation, of innovation. Because sure enough, that was the same thing when the internet hit. That was the same thing in the boom of social media, the same thing when YouTube has it for like 3 resurrections at this point of different eras. Same thing with TikTok and all these other just applications where I'm naming dropping things where people can just associate to where we are as far as the same lane if they're not grasping the significance of, yes, this is very powerful. This is a very dynamic. There's a lot of opportunities. And yeah, there's some shadows in there. We're not going to deny all things have shadows if you don't use it a proper, responsible way. But I love the fact that you are looking at it from a lot of different perspectives first to then give direction. I don't take that for granted. That's why I immediately connect. I'm a big learner. I just want to learn. And I think collaboration and conversation will allow us to really expand these horizons so people can get a better perspective of, how do I look at AI? What has been the history of it? Where do we go from here? But people forget about machine learning. People forget about automation. People forget about all these other layers within this AI sandwich over here. We're so focused on this. We're not thinking about all the other things that have to connect with it to actually bring forth a product, a solution, an interface that we can use. I mean, if we're looking at code, the trend now is everyone wants to be code less.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to have it as simple as possible. If you want to get very micro, you're going to have to know the back end of the language and know the code to give you the very specific things you want to do, the experiences, UX, UI. People want all these things, but they want it in a very condensed, nice box.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like AI Cliff Notes, you know, like here's the secrets to the kingdom or the keys to the kingdom, and like run with it.
We want AI IKEA. Just
here we go.
Like,
here's a simple little instructions. You just
we haven't gotten there yet, y'all.
Yeah.
There's too much variables to consider as we're trying to get this built out, and it's still the wild, wild west. A lot of it is still heavily unregulated.
Yep.
I mean, and I do want to switch gears and talk to the different industries that you've either thought through, worked with, from either pharma and healthcare to restaurants to e-com, because that's a different experience. It's not, one cut fits all. You really have to be, not just even with regulations, but just with utility. How do we integrate but still keep data safe and privacy? Hasn't anyone even thought about that? Even if you had your own self-contained ecosystem, how do you use this utility but still be under the same regulations of HIPAA?
Yeah. The fun part is, so some of these questions are big, hairy, ugly questions we've been trying to answer digitally for quite some time. Like, it's just because now there's this puck or there's your phone, there's something listening. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. What about my data? And I'm like, well, we've been trying to answer this question for a few years, and I'm not going to kick it down the road, but the digital profile you've created in a world pre-cookielessness is a pretty robust creature and digital twin of yourself. We have been, though, forced to think about that a little bit more, and that's where my little button shows of the open voice network, of thinking about how do we do that ethically? How do we make sure that when these regulations are coming down, they're not knee-jerk? Because we are seeing some of that, because there are bad actors of, I'm going to use this to make my quick buck. I can tell you, in any technology, there's the quick buck, and then there's the actual longevity useful buck. There are no overnight millionaires, unfortunately. But it is thinking through all of those things. And the other thing, too, to touch on that is, we're talking a lot about the back end, right? Of the ways that the systems tie in, the natural language processing. There's also the whole front end of, what am I talking to? What am I having that conversation with? What happens when, as I laughingly say, voice and tone, it becomes voice and then tone, because it is that personality of becoming real. What are then the additional cues? I mean, audio branding is a whole other riff of an area that is fascinating, of how you can use that from UI elements to brand elements so that you can balance brand and utility, because no one wants to hear a monologue. No one wants, even to be interacting with something that just talks about itself. No, I mean, you don't talk to a person like that. So it's how do we make that an organic conversation? Well, then we have to think about the thing is that feed into that. Well, there's going to be audio cues and audio listening and then audio branding. So that whole, like, there is this whole other area that I quite honestly think can continually get a lot better, that can use AI from the idea of how do I make my creative better, but how do I even make that, what are those foundations to pull that out? I'm always inviting more UXers and brand strategists, please come to the party, because we do need you for that stuff. And no, you don't have to code it.
Oh.
You know?
Well, like the idea of a full stack conversational person, like that was the case 5 years ago. But as things have progressed and there's been some specialization in the industry, it's just like what happened with user experience or content or anything else. Like, yes, you could do it all, but it's probably not going to be as good as if you had professionals in other disciplines to bring their point of view to the world and help you think through things that maybe you hadn't thought through before. On the healthcare side, I mean, obviously HIPAA is always a consideration and always something that we struggle with, but a lot of times it's used as an excuse to not try innovation. And there's plenty of ways you can actually use AI that don't require any sort of HIPAA regulation. So like for disease education and helping people find information quicker, voice search, optimizing your content so that if people use their phone and they're doing a search, they find your content on your website. And that technically is using AI, and it's kind of using the algorithms that Google has for search or Bing on the Alexa side. But at the end of the day, those are things you can already do that don't require any sort of HIPAA compliance, because you're not talking about, you know, my condition and my personal information and having those kind of two things tied together. So there's a lot of things you can do before you get to the HIPAA piece. But then even with HIPAA, like if you voice enable your mobile app, you know, your HIPAA compliance and your data privacy and all that stuff from the app will actually cover what you're doing with the voice component of it. So it's just looking at ways to be aware of, you know, the specific requirements of HIPAA and data security and things like that, but looking for ways that we can enhance existing experiences. And I think on the healthcare side, that's where a lot of people are focusing their efforts. And then, you know, we've done things on the entertainment side. We've done things on the retail and restaurant side. And so there's varying degrees, and it's really those four industries. So it's retail, healthcare, restaurants, and entertainment that are kind of leading the charge when it comes to AI, conversational AI, and voice. Not to say that other industries aren't also actively looking at it, like finance. You see a lot of assistance, you know, from Bank of America and things like that. But generally, when you look at it, those are the four industries that are really investing heavily. But on the flip side, from our consumer research, those are the four industries that people are most interested in using their voice or conversational AI to interact with that brand. So like it's kind of this perfect marriage where those are the ones that are kind of leading the charge. And then it'll trickle down to all the other industries, because as you start to do it with, you know, your personal stuff, it starts as a novelty and it kind of goes all the way to how did I live without this? So the more you interact with it, the more you have success and you're able to find the information you're looking for. It's like, well, what else can I do with it? Start trying more and more things, and then you're going to start to explore with different industries and different tasks that you're trying to complete.
I feel like we're at a point, and I'll switch gears slightly to a lot of marketing business who are on this high level of FOMO. Any new app, any new buzzword that's associated. It's the running joke with marketing. You put any word in front of marketing, it's a whole new discipline. It doesn't matter what it is. You put any word in front of it, someone's going to trademark it. I have a whole new discipline in marketing. I feel like it's the same thing with AI. You put AI at the end of anything, and oh my goodness, it's like you just put on a sticker and it sells.
Well, I was going to say, when we were at the Restaurant Association show here in Chicago, there were a couple of people that were in AI, and they had a booth, and it literally says, "We do AI." And so we were like, "All right, that's cool. Let's go talk to them and find out." So it's like, well, what kind of AI you do? And they're like, "Oh, you know what you're talking about." So like, it's, oh, these are predictive people. Okay, these are conversational people. But I think it to that point, like we're still kind of at this is AI. It's not what flavor of AI is it. It's, you know, just kind of that umbrella understanding. So that's something that, you know, recently we saw at a conference. And I think we were probably some of the only people that actually could say, all right, so what part of AI are you, or what are you trying to accomplish with your system?
I love that you asked this question, because I want people to think through that.
Yeah.
When not only within their own business, like what part of this massive umbrella that we're unraveling here that we need to focus on and work through first.
Yeah.
And it may not be the sexiest part of it either that everyone wants to jump to. Let's be real. And I think also it's kind of like people think they'll put a chatbot on a website and expect higher conversions just because they put a chatbot on the website and it pops up in the corner.
Right.
Have you thought through the flow of steps? One, to compel someone the right colors. Is it accessible? Is it the right font? Is it the right placement? Does it pop up at the right time? Is it a nuisance? Is it a convenience? When they click on it, how's the flow? How's the UX experience? What are we thinking through? Is it feels like a human is engaging, or is it fabricated and I'm turned away and my bounce rate is on your website is through the roof? Have you thought through that before we're just saying add a chatbot to the website and I expect? But I feel this is the expectation or the delusion, dare I say, of many who went to one conference, watched one video, did one thing in Chat GPT that they thought did something they didn't expect it to, and they're like, "We're going to get gold. Let's go all in and invest all in." How do you slow people down to that regard and kind of bring them back, not to destroy their zeal, but to maybe shine a better light of practicality into what they're trying to really do?
Yeah, that's kind of our, hey, Copernicus, let's navigate back to the front of the line. And honestly, 100%. If I just put a chatbot on it and I'm using my frequently asked questions, which, by the way, when I was talking about my content before, is an elephant's graveyard of stuff that I couldn't fit in the rest of the website. And I think it's frequently asked questions, but it's really just stuff I didn't know how to organize. That's okay, strike one.
Well, I mean, let's face it. FAQs are always what a copywriter comes up with at the last minute because we need an FAQ page.
Crap, yeah.
And so it's here's the things we think people might want to know, but there's some seldomly really frequently asked. So that right there is a thing. Google indexes FAQs now. They're indexing podcast content. This has to be truly frequently asked in order for your answer to show up. So it's forcing people to be more intentional with their content for sure. Yeah.
And I think, all of it kind of comes back to a content problem, right? Yeah. How do I get the information? What's the type of experience? And I was just talking with someone earlier today about that in generally it's, is it informational? Is it transactional? Or is it social? And social is not really that often because as much as we love our brands, no one really wants to sit and talk with the brand for hours or even minutes. I know, blasphemy. It's coming back to thinking about what is it we're actually trying to solve in the first place. I hate to, sound like everything old is new again, but back in my early days of working in promotional marketing, and they'd be like, we want to do a coupon. And it's like, well, do you really want to do a coupon? Or do we need to figure out a loyalty program that generates repeat purchase over time and value and loyalty?
Come on.
Oh, yeah. As opposed to moving more product. I mean, as much as I say, a lot of the clients we work with at the end of the day, when it comes down to what the measurable objective is, it's get more share, move more product, sell more services. And I remember a very smart strategy person I worked with before was don't let that make you sad. Those are the things, because you're not running a not-for-profit. Somewhat, we have to make sure that the business stays and those goals don't get lost. But the reality is if we're going back to those arch problems, then we can think about the right technology for those things. Every time someone said there is a killer app, an angel lost its wings. My new thing now is anytime anyone tells me use AI for an instant assistant, an instant solution, an instant whatever, that's more angels are dropping out of the sky. Right. It's not instant. And anyone who tells you otherwise is, I believe, to quote Princess Bride, is trying to sell you something. And that's, very much. It's let's stop for a minute, pause, think about what we're truly going to solve, and then let's break it down into those things so that we can make progress without spending a load of money against something that may not work. Because the reality is when we do these things, and no matter how much user testing we do, the minute I throw that out there live, there's going to be 15% of people who just, I would have never even thought to go that way. But we can learn from that. And that's the other amazing thing about these conversational experiences is we get verbatims that are anonymous, for the record, anonymous, but that are telling us these are what people are asking for. So frequently asked questions really do get frequent when I understand, well, no, they actually want to do this. And that points back to the model that Scott was talking about before of there's 4 distinct mind shift changes that happen to your audience, regardless if they're that early adopter, the laggard, mainstream, what have you. And it's, well, why would I ever want to use that? Then they're like, okay, fine, I'll try it out. This is where fart skills live. I'll be honest, anything, if you think about when your phone made that noise, then we had Alexa farting. I mean, I swear all roads begin with humor and novelty. Okay, that was successful. What else can I do? And then eventually, as those experiences become successful, we end up in the land of, how do I even live without this? And that's how we went with smartphones. If you think about the first time everyone had the signature on their first iPhone it was, please excuse typos, but someone laughingly said, oh, I'm just messing about because I'm not using a BlackBerry. And then we moved into, oh, this is helpful. Now my day sucks more if I forget my phone than if I forget my wallet. So that is those mind shifts that have happened. Those are the behavior shifts. And those are the things we can, as marketers, market to as we think about where's the right place of where that intersection of where I'm going to be able to solve my audience's problems, but where else am I going to be able to continue to drive my brand forward too? Because we're not doing this for charity. We're doing this to be able to solve problems and help and meet needs.
Well, and you said it, Troy, a lot of times the problems that we're solving aren't sexy, but they do make a big impact for the organization. So a lot of times we'll see internal initiatives happening, never going to make it public, but we'll hear things about, oh, we're using it in the warehouse to help people pick products a little bit more efficiently, or we're using it for back of house in restaurants to help people know exactly how to make this Big Mac or whatever. But just thinking about it from an operational standpoint, there's tons of things that you can do to use AI to streamline, make things more efficient, like SharePoint and accessing information on SharePoint. How awesome would it be to be able to say, find me last year's report on XYZ and just have it find it versus you digging through the navigation in SharePoint. So are there things internally that you can make the organization more efficient, help that knowledge share, especially if you're an organization across the country or across the world, and actually have those silos kind of be broke down, or be able to ask Excel for, what were last week's sales numbers, and be able to dig into it and be able to interact with the spreadsheet in a conversational way, asking questions, but having the data come in the way you need it to. The analytics thing is especially important because as a UXer, I always used to have to request a data pull, and then they would pull the report for me. I'd have to go through it versus just being able to say, what's the bounce rate on this page, or, what's the click-through rate or the conversion rate or whatever. Just being able to have access to that information and not have to have someone physically pull the data and potentially even interpret it for me and actually have the system do it would be a huge time saver. And you think about that across all the organizations that exist, your profitability is going to go through the roof just because you don't have that middle person, not gatekeeping, but just due to lack of time and being able to pull it when you need it.
No, that lands. And I think, to your point, all the time, and hopefully Siri doesn't respond when I say it, but instead of me having to remind myself to do something, go through all the steps, Siri, can you remind me to do this by this date, by this time, to this person, and it's done. I just save so much time and mental energy just by having the functionality to speak and let it be so, not to replace me, but to be an aid to me.
Well, and that's why discovery is so critical, and we're such big proponents of it. We kind of got away from discovery and actually understanding business objectives, user needs when it comes to the web, because we've got all this historical data. We can look back and, we know how it works on the web. We don't need to do that. But when it comes to this conversational thing, Troy, the way you ask for something, the way I ask for something could be totally different. Could mean the same thing, but the word choices or accents, all those things could be different. So first and foremost, you got to kind of suss that out. But if you don't know your customer journey, if you don't know your audience types and the personas and their triggers, start there. Those are the basics that you absolutely have to have nailed down. Because Sue said, if you don't, it's just going to exacerbate those issues. It's not going to solve the issues. It's just going to make it worse because you're spending all this extra cash investing in a technology when you don't have those basic knowledge points done.
If people can start looking at AI as an aid and an adjacent to what we're doing, I mean, our jobs are already hard. The reason why AI is so practical now, the technology is moving so fast, the demands are moving so fast, everything's shifting. We, as a human, as amazing and brilliant, as complicated as we are, can only do so much.
Yeah.
And so having an aid to help us save time, save resources, being able to process things at a higher level, not to say it's to replace us, because you still need someone to train it, to feed it, to condition it to how you need to see the world. It's not trying to replace us. Now, to that replacement piece part, though, I feel it's the same way to when social media really started being for social selling and positioning for businesses. There's a whole new dynamic of education we now need to apply to elevate off the principles that we already know. And to your point, Susan, earlier when you were like, put digital in front of it, oh my God, what is happening here? I know about newspaper. It's the same foundational principles, but we're navigating in a digital format. So in the same way, we're moving into conversational AI and all these different things that we're trying to do. Look, we're going to be at a point now where people are going to ask Google, they're going to ask Alexa, they're going to ask Siri, this thing. Where are you going to come up in this race? Everyone's trying to be the first page on Google, but where are you at in the first option or two when they ask you? You won't have one chance.
And the thing of that is think about the conversation. So, you know, SEO, some of the thinking has been, I want to hit for these keywords or my branded keywords, which is a whole other ballgame because we shouldn't forget those. Those are really important because like I always think of it as being in a bar with call brands. You can order a gin and tonic, or I can have someone say, I would like a Bombay and tonic. Very different results. Same thing. That's the world we're living in now, where it's about the questions and the request, not just the word. Because just like if I did a search right now of what is AI, well, that's a rabbit hole and a half. But if I want to know what generative AI is, or I add some more descriptors, then I get to the answers I want. So that's how we have to start thinking about SEO. But the other thing that comes with it, and again, this is like, as you were saying, like put that moniker in front of it. Good SEO, good voice SEO, good conversational SEO starts with good traditional SEO. If you don't have your schema marked up right, if you don't have your H1 set, you need to go back to school and get that done. And that's our cautionary tale on all of this. If what you're doing right now isn't working, throwing more technology at it probably will not solve it. There are a couple cases, sure, it might. But if your house foundation is crumbly, you're just going to be putting more stuff on that crumbly foundation. So you're not going to get the bang for your buck. So invest that money. And we've had to have that conversation of, before we dive down this path, let's get this part of the house in order. Because that way, then it'll make it easier to implement on the other side, because we'll be clear about what conversations we want to have. So if I'm doing from a voice search perspective, it is the conversations about my brand and around my brand. There's adjacent, if you have a product and its use cases or its applications, those are things you're going to show up for. You want to be in that conversation. So it very much covers under EAT, the good old Google principles of EAT, but it's also then making sure that you've got the linking and that you're there, that you have the answer for the questions that matter most, not all the questions, the ones that matter most.
The other thing to know is your users' needs don't change depending on what technology they're interacting with. Now, if they're in awareness phase or consideration phase, purchase phase, those needs are different, but those needs are the very same, whether they're watching a video, reading long form content, asking a question to a chat bot. So at the end of the day, it's identifying what is someone trying to accomplish or achieve at each one of those phases. And then if it's appropriate, how do we move them from awareness to consideration? How do we move them from consideration to purchase? And then ultimately, how can we use it to conversational AI or AI in general for retention? Like, can we make better recommendations? Can we use it for advocacy? What are those different things where we can actually help, retain our audiences and make things better for them? So it really, as unsexy as this is, it's going back to those basics and really identifying your audience, knowing your marketing funnel, knowing those triggers and the messages that resonate. Because if they resonate elsewhere, they're probably going to resonate here. And sure, you have to adjust it so that it's appropriate, it feels natural. But at the end of the day, like, it's really nailing those basics and then looking for ways that you can enhance those experiences.
What comes to my mind is really on anchoring familiarity in order to accelerate performance. And you need those touch points. Like you said, honestly, you could go on the south side of Chicago at Northside Chicago. Same facility, talk different, we think different. You know, are you Cubs or White Sox? Like, what's going on? You know, what are the enough anchor points for me to consider this familiar to me? To remove my resistance in order to go to the next phase and the next step, which may include more additional conversational AI or lack thereof. But it's all about mapping. And I don't think we do enough ideation and mapping before we start this process. What is the architect? Where are we? How are we structuring this whole thing? You don't just go ahead and want to build a skyscraper bigger than the Sears Tower or the Willis Tower. Now I'm still calling it the Sears Tower.
Yeah, Sears Tower.
It is what it is at this point. But I digress. I think in the same way, how do we get more people to see it requires more effort? I was going to say earlier, real quick, it's probably going to be a dime for us. We should do a campaign where we buy the domain Instant AI and market it to no end. But when people go to the site, they scroll, there's a nice hero, it's like, ooh, and it's like, you're not ready.
Yeah.
And it's all it is just educational pieces, getting them on the boat to realizing it's not as instant. There's nothing instant about this at all.
Yeah, it actually reminds me, there's a website, and I assume it's still up. Should I use a carousel.com? And literally you visit the URL and it says no. And then there's like other, support points on why you shouldn't use a carousel. But it's a similar type of a thing where it's like, people have a thing to sell. So like whether it's a chat bot or a voice assistant or Chat GPT hacks or whatever, like I got a thing, a tactic that I want to sell. And it's like, how do we take that step back? How do we actually look at the entire ecosystem and say, all right, it can apply anywhere. Where is it going to make the most inroads for us? And whether it's audience facing or internal facing, like kind of take that step back and try to be more intentional with it. And then, like you said, map to existing things and say, all right, this problem over here, we solved it 10 different times. Maybe we don't need to address it in AI, but this one over here, we've never touched. And that's actually a perfect candidate. So it's looking at it from a holistic standpoint, and really, as much as I hate the term omni-channel or multi-channel, it's where within that ecosystem that you've already created does this fit? What tools that you're already using, like a lot of the Adobe tools have AI built into it. Your audience is probably using tools that have AI components in it, whether they know it or not. And it's just like, how do we activate it and see how it can personalize our CRM and get better open rates or whatever our goals are, but like making sure we understand those goals before we start to try to jam another technology or another tactic somewhere.